We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rick Deschamps, and I'm the Executive Director of Veteran Services here for Cuyahoga Community College for all 4 campuses. A little bit of history regarding veterans, as we're just coming off of Veterans Day and what our topic is going to be today, talking about veterans and job transition and education transition. A little history, the college, if you're not aware, since it opened almost 50 years ago, 24,000 veterans have gone through Cuyahoga Community College, including the mayor of Cleveland, Frank Jackson, is a Tri-C veteran who, when he came home from Vietnam, started on his career path here at Tri-C. Currently, right now at Tri-C, we are going on about our 5th straight big semester, if you will, a fall or spring semester of 1,000 veterans enrolled at the school. Right now, 1 in every 33 students in the college is a veteran. But as we know, we're graduating well. Our graduation rate is about 8% for veterans. As they move on, one of the biggest issues coming up facing veterans is this transition from battlefield to blackboard, transitioning into employment. And tough to do when you're in the midst of coming off an economic recession. Right now, nationally, I believe the statistics are veterans unemployment hovering a little bit higher than the nation, about 13% among Iraq and Afghanistan vets, as opposed to, I think we're still hovering below 8%, just right under 8% at the national unemployment level. A lot of issues to talk about. Some things are going right. We're going to talk about a few of those programs that are taking place local level, state level, county level to assist veterans. And we're going to take a look at what are some of the barriers and what are some of those programs helping veterans transition into the workforce. I am happy to be joined today, my right, your left, by Mr. Dan Akins, himself also a veteran of Iraq, who is the programs manager for the Ohio Department of Veteran Services in Columbus. And Dan is very active and engaged with me and our third guest, who is arriving momentarily from the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services. The 3 of us are serving on a White House commission that was set up here in Cleveland by the U.S. Department of Labor to specifically look at best practices in hiring, transitional programs, training programs for veterans coming home to get back into the workforce. Cleveland was one of only 6 cities selected by the White House for this initiative called Strong Communities, Strong Cities. And Dan, myself, and our third guest who will be here momentarily, Clayton Cozy, were all asked to serve on this White House commission as we look to streamline getting veterans access into the workforce. That being said, why don't I start out, Dan, I'm going to open up with a question from a state perspective, the governor's perspective and the director of Veteran Services perspective, Colonel Tom Moe. What do you see as probably the 1 or 2, maybe even 3 biggest barriers right now in helping veterans transition into the workforce?
Can you hear me good? All right. I'd say the number one obstacle that comes to mind, I mean, there's kind of different areas where there are obstacles. There's obstacles among the veterans themselves, the education systems that are there to serve them, and then also amongst employers and professional organizations. I'd say the number one challenge for returning veterans is being able to translate their military education and training into job skills that they can use here in the state of Ohio. I think if the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America did a study together with Prudential Insurance, which they've recently published the results on their website at iava.org. That was the number one obstacle that most veterans saw to getting good employment once they returned to Ohio.
A couple things too being done to address that, and Dan has an interesting background because when he and I first met, he was with the veterans programs over at the Ohio Board of Regents before they stood up the new Department of Veteran Services. So Dan brings a real interesting perspective, and I believe over at the Board of Regents, it is under the direction of Dr. Paula Compton that a lot of groundwork was done with the Association of College Educators, ACE, that here in Ohio now, 2-year and 4-year state schools, such as Tri-C, Cleveland State, now must use, ACE has put together a guidelines book that takes your military training, what it is in military speak, translates it into English, what does that training mean in civilian speak, and then what could that training equate to in the way of college courses so that veterans are starting to get more college credit for their military training. I know I can speak here at Tri-C. We have 3 people in the enrollment office downtown who do nothing but review military transcripts and training so we can move you into the workforce quicker. Best example I had was 2 years ago, an Air Force veteran had taken 19 credits worth of courses at the Air Force Institute, online institute, and we were able to transfer 17 of those 19 credits, which put him a full semester ahead in his education plan. He went on to Cleveland State, and I was happy to report graduated last May. I went to his graduation, and he's now working for a manufacturing company here in Cleveland. Also joining me to my left, your right, thank you, is a Navy veteran, Mr. Clayton Cozy, who is with the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services, excuse me, and is one of their veterans representatives. The Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services, you may be more familiar with the Employment Connection Centers. There's one in downtown Cleveland, one right out by the Chevy plant on Brook Park. Within those centers, they now have designated veterans representatives to work with veterans on job hunting, job skills, job search, resume building. And Clayton, I just asked Danny, from your perspective, because you're actually boots on the ground. You're working day to day with veterans looking for job training and employment. What do you see as one or two of the biggest barriers right now? Danny mentioned credit for military training. What are you seeing from your boots on the ground position?
First of all, Danny is absolutely correct. There is a gap between military training and that training being recognized in the civilian sector, and we are working on that one. But short of that, the biggest gap we see is just there's a disconnect between the job seekers and the employers with regard to getting everyone on the same page as far as what they're looking for. You know, the website Rick referred to that helps translate your military training into civilian language and accreditation, that is huge. The biggest gap we see is that communication factor. Veterans coming in, their resumes look like one long acronym, and then when they sit down with an employer, they're still speaking in those military terms, which I hate to admit it, but if an employer doesn't understand that language, they will probably not ask you to define it for them because they don't want to appear that they don't know something. So they just will move on. So the best strategy is to make sure you put things that are easily understandable to them. And that's the biggest gap right now, is just making that connection between veteran and employer, just to be able to, first of all, get you in front of them, and then once you're in front of them, speaking on the same terms so that you can communicate what you bring to the table that will help them and benefit their business and make them want to bring you on board.
Let me ask another question related to that to both of you, a little bit different than the education and skills question, and that is the medical question. I know from my experience here, you have some of our returning vets, particularly at Iraq, Afghanistan, are having transition issues, whether it be post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injury. Do you see from your perspective and the employers you talk to, one, a hesitancy by those employers? Is this something I want to get into if I hire this individual? And from the flip side, the veteran themselves, is there a hesitancy to come forward and admit this on a job application for fear of I won't get the job? Danny?
I'd say you probably do see that. From an employer perspective, a lot of the employers I've interacted with, obviously personally, by the time they bring in our department to talk to an employer, they've identified some of these issues and concerns they have, and they've asked for our help in helping them educate their leadership on how to allay some of those concerns. Now, that said, what they do when they're, like the same study I referred to, the IVA study, they also surveyed employers, major employers. And a common theme amongst the concerns of the employers was being able to accommodate mental and physical handicaps that veterans may have. whether it be PTSD or brain injuries, physical injuries, and the uncertainty over how they should do that and what it means for the rest of their workforce, I think does cause a certain amount of pause when an employer is looking at, where are they going to target their recruitment efforts. Certainly, I think those employers who have a demonstrated commitment to hiring veterans, you've seen them, go that extra mile. And I'd say that, and I'm sure Clayton probably has more perspective on this than I do. I know certainly from my perspective and as an agency, that's almost kind of a dividing line between the employers we see that are truly committed to hiring veterans and those who are not.
I agree totally. The employers out there that again, as Danny mentioned, are committed to hiring veterans are most importantly educating themselves as to what post-traumatic stress is, how it manifests itself, and other injuries that our veterans are coming home with. And so they already know what accommodations they can make, they should make. And with regard to veterans, many of us are hesitant to talk about any injuries or anything we have going on that we perceive as a weakness, because for one thing, we were trained all through the military. I don't have any weaknesses, I have strengths. I can get it done. There's nothing I can't do if I don't try hard enough. And even one step further, I've had veterans come to me and with a genuine concern about admitting they have PTSD because there's some fallacy that there is a database of post-traumatic stress veterans. And once you're on that database, you're in it forever. And there's an asterisk next to your name every time you apply for a job. And that is absolutely not true. Post-traumatic stress is something that the medical community is still learning about, but at the same time, it comes back to what Danny's referring to as the employers who are really committed to bringing veterans into their organization. They're also have put mechanisms in place to understand and accommodate, whereas some employers that aren't necessarily as committed to hiring veterans, there will be some friction, but that'll be the case anywhere.
I would also add that I think in some ways as advocates for veterans, and there are some veterans advocates who I think are our own worst enemies because of the way they portray PTSD. I think people throw out, what I think are irresponsible statistics of, that make good media play when you're watching the news about 1 in 3 guys coming back with PTSD, and they don't really put that in context of what is PTSD. It's a treatable condition, it's a curable condition, and if you look at the media portrayals of guys coming back and the issues they end up dealing with, I think in a lot of ways that perception that's been created in the minds of the general public, and the employers are essentially a reflection of the general public. They watch the same shows, see the same news, and it does get brought up often as a concern. So I think, that's why I've always asked, particularly, we've got some very good advocates in Ohio for veteran mental health and issues related to that, but I've always asked them to please be careful about how they're talking about this and in front of what audiences, because, certainly as veterans, we understand, we saw what we saw and dealt with what we dealt with and all made our transitions. At the same time, we also know that there's no possible way that you can really translate that in a meaningful way to a civilian employer who's never been there, done that, as it were.
And that's one thing we've looked at specifically in Clayton. We were talking about COVET, the White House Commission, the 3 of us are working on. We see a lot of the veteran employer resource fairs and getting the vets ready. One thing we clearly identified with this commission already is the need for employer education on veterans issue. What is the military training? But what you're addressing, the medical issues. What is PTSD? Are you aware there are different levels? And one thing I know, Clayton, you've been at some of the events I've been at, and Danny, I've actually heard you speak on it. When we get into some of these issues, particularly PTSD, and when I work with counselors here at the school and everything, I remind them PTSD is not uniquely a veterans issue, okay? We have had students on some of our campuses exposed to gang violence, have participated in gang violence, have been PTSD You know, sadly, as an example, I hate to say, what happened at Brunswick High School here, right at graduation time. Don't tell me there aren't kids down there that haven't been affected by that. If there's an upside to it is that veterans have drawn attention, one, to the issue. So one thing we're addressing with COVET, Danny, I know you've talked about it and some of the initiatives the director's working at down in Columbus. Clayton, if you want to jump in, about employer education. What are some of the things, I know you're, in addition to the transcript, some of the things the state is working on in terms of making employers better informed?
Well, and just to give you an idea of what our department does, we're a fairly new department. We're only about 4 years old. And honestly, we were created in reaction to a VA report that indicated that Ohio vets weren't connected to their VA benefits at rates of other states. So here we are. To that end, being relatively new, we're fairly limited. So what we try to do as a department is we don't so much create our own programs. What we try to do is identify programs within the state that do assist veterans or can be used to assist veterans, and we try to help make those programs either work better, work with other partners more efficiently, and certainly we also have a big role to advocate for legislation related to veteran program at both the state and federal levels, and we try to execute that. One thing, this veteran employment became an issue for the department it always has been, but in terms of us really focusing on it, was about a year and a half ago when the first reports of, not first, but really kind of the veteran employment issue really became highlighted when, post 9/11 veteran unemployment was reaching 16, 17, 18%. And there really was kind of, with the end of the Iraq war, and there was really this, oh geez, what are we doing for these folks coming home? So part of what we've tried to work on, we've been trying to promote the JFS Veterans Program. A lot of well-meaning advocates in the state are looking to start up their own employment programs, and we've tried to steer them to the program that actually has proven a great deal of success, particularly in the last calendar year. I think by the time they release their federal fiscal year 12 numbers, JFS will have placed more than 2,000 veterans into good paying or higher paying jobs across the state, and probably about an additional 200 veterans into education and training programs to get them to that next job. In fact, we believe that program works well enough that this past year, with the return of the Ohio National Guard's 37th Brigade, which is the largest Ohio National Guard deployment since the Second World War, we devised a way for the National Guard to identify who their folks are coming home, who will be coming home to no job and have no plan to go to school, and to connect them to JFS as they're doing their transition back from their demobilization sites back into the state of Ohio. We're hoping what that will do is kind of a transition in how we manage veteran services in the state of Ohio to one where we don't sit back and wait for the veteran to find us. We go out and try to find the veteran and then market our services to them and encourage them to take advantage, whether it be Job and Family Services or County Veteran Service Commissions, the VA, whatever it might be. I think too often there's historically been an attitude of we just sit back and wait for the vet to come to us. I think we need to get to more of a point where we sell our services to the veterans. As part of the employment piece, along with, we were able to get the governor really to buy into this idea that we need to promote it as part of the governor's overall workforce transformation system. And so I'm pleased that we're at the point where now every time the governor talks to a prospective employer who's looking to set up operations in the state of Ohio, he does ask them about, what does your company do to hire veterans? What can we do to help connect you to veterans? And which is a good thing for us. At the same side, though, we're trying to work with groups like the U.S. Chamber, the Hiring Our Heroes program, colleges and universities, any partner we can find. It's been fairly successful, and really what we're trying to do is steer them towards JFS, because JFS has access to this massive database of veteran resumes where they can identify vets and directly connect them to that employer. Clayton can obviously go into more detail, but they provide some of these folks with intensive services as far as resumes, all that stuff. And what it does, it leaves both the veteran and the employer with a good feeling that the veteran was connected to good opportunities and the employer was connected to well-qualified vets, which provides, for that employer who may be doubting whether or not they should be going after veterans, they see them succeeding in other companies, then they say, all right, this is what I want for my company too. So it's, we've been trying to partner as much as we can. Individual companies, we've met with GM, Coca-Cola, We now have a regular referral. GM sends us a weekly report of job openings they have that we immediately forward to our partners in JFS, National Guard, and Department of Defense. We have a lot of processes like that. And then now we're working also to try to improve other government processes. We're trying to get state agencies. You know, now that we've been badgering employers about hiring veterans, now we're trying to get Ohio state agencies like ODOT, you know, public safety and DRC already do a very good job of it. But we're trying to get more vets into the workforce. We're looking at veteran small business, contracting, a lot of issues like that to provide multiple avenues of opportunity for veterans.
Clayton, you want to jump in on some of the things you're doing at the JFS level? One thing that's good about, with the state's involvement now actively through the Department of Veteran Services and JFS, when it comes to the employers, it's putting a second set of eyes on the employers. And this is not to play big brother, but since the tax credit announcement came out a year ago, and you've seen it, and I've seen it, all of a sudden, companies that never had associated with veterans wanted to be your best friend because they were getting a tax credit for hiring a veteran. And what our concern was on the COVID committee, the White House Commission, is it better be a real job, not $6.25 an hour part-time, and you're getting roughly a $4,000 to $5,000 a year tax credit. These jobs have to have meaning. Clayton, why don't you take it from there and pick up on what Department of Jobs and Family Services?
Essentially what we do is our offices, the employment offices are referred to as one-stops, and we try to take that literally as a one-stop shop for the veteran and for the employer. As far as educating employers go, we do everything on a very direct basis. And part of our job is to take that veteran, provide the intensive services that Danny referred to, which is making sure that they have a sharp resume that's targeted to their industry. Make sure that they know how to act in an interview, dress for an interview. Make sure that they have adequate health care, housing, transportation, so that there aren't any burdens on them when it comes to their job search. And we also teach them how to job search. And then to that end, we network with employers. And on a very basic level, we do what are called job developments. I have veteran A, who's a machinist. I know of a handful of machining companies. I call them up directly. I have a veteran candidate that fits the bill. Let's get them together. While I'm doing that networking with the employers is where the education piece comes in, to make sure they're aware of what veterans bring to the table, what some of the hurdles that they have coming home, or if they've been home for a while. Because to me, a veteran isn't only the guy or girl coming home, getting off the boat right now. Veterans are anyone who's served honorably. So I work with veterans who have served, coming home right now, have served in OEF, OIF, have served in Desert Storm, have served in Vietnam. For a while I was even working with a Korean War veteran. If they need our help, we provide it. And the education piece is probably the biggest one, educating both the veteran and the employer. And we do that on a direct basis. I'll call them up and sit down and meet with them and explain what we do and what veterans bring to the table, and I answer their questions. And sometimes if we cast a bigger net, we'll hold career fairs. We just held one at Quicken Loans Arena last week. Part of that recruitment of employers is we bring them all together and educate them. Talk to them about what we expect of them if they're going to be recruiting at our job fair, what veterans are going to be bringing to them. And it's not, and even then, it's not just a one-time thing. We're setting up a network, so I can still maintain contact, call upon that employer today or 10 years from now. If the HR rep that I know is not there, I'll talk to their replacement. And it's not just me that's doing that, it's all of our staff at JFS in the Veterans Program. There are 130 of us throughout the state, and we all do the same thing. We provide intensive services to veterans to get them job ready, and then we job develop. We talk to employers. If we need to, we'll get a hold of Danny's people to see how we can help each other. You know, this employer doesn't seem to be reacting the way we'd like them to react, and Danny's folks carry a little bit bigger stick than we do, and we like that. So when we need help, and vice versa, if they come across something that they needed our help with, the same thing, it's open communication, not adversarial at all. You know, we work together, we both have the same goal, getting vets employed. When we need to, we bring the VA in also. And at the end of the day, it's making sure that the veteran is ready to go to work and the employer knows what they're getting.
Danny, why don't you talk about, again, it's as we move from barriers to some of the things that are being done with the one-stops do, the employment connections. The program you're actively involved in right now, involving those state agencies where licenses are required, and kind of the innovative approach you and your team and the Colonel are taking to expedite some of that access to jobs where a state license is required, but taking into account military experience.
Yeah, obviously that's a huge obstacle for a lot of folks coming back, is that every state has its own licensing boards, its own professional certification organizations, its own set of authorizing law that those organizations operate off of. In Ohio, we got a little bit, we were part of the Troops to Teachers effort, so we do administer that program from within our agency, and I want to say we have one person who does it for us, Chris Pica. He's already put 40 veterans into teaching positions in the state of Ohio this year. So that's an issue to help deal with, like teaching licenses and education. Last year we were able to get, or this past General Assembly, we were able to get a provision put into a transportation authorization bill related to commercial driver's license, that any recently separated veteran who had a driver's license or a military driver's license and documented training on driving heavy military vehicles, such as military style semi-trucks, heavy equipment transports, and those types of vehicles, can waive the skills test portion of an Ohio CDL exam. So they just have to sit for the written, and then they're licensed. Tomorrow, we are going to be sitting in a committee kind of to support a amendment to a physician's assistant bill with legislation that was drafted by the Medical Board of Ohio to acknowledge military experience as commensurate with pursuing a physician's assistant license with the state of Ohio. And that came up actually from a constituent case where an Army physician assistant who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan in Ohio, to be prima facie licensed as a PA, you need either a master's degree or a bachelor's degree with work experience. Well, this gentleman has a bachelor's degree, trained by the Army, worked in the Army for years as a PA, got a job at Marietta College as their physician assistant, and then OG found out he couldn't get licensed in the state of Ohio. To their credit, the medical board, rather than rejecting his application, tabled it and said, given our current law, we cannot accept his military experience as on face value, so we're going to table it. We're going to draft legislation, and tomorrow they'll be introducing it in committee to now allow them, once the law goes into effect, to recognize that military experience for the purposes of issuing that license. We are looking at a broader effort, possibly starting with an executive order, to direct all state licensing agencies and certification bodies to take a look at their requirements and determine where military experience and training can be used to fulfill those requirements. That'll probably be followed up by legislation at some point. And to that end, we put together a document for those licensing agencies, should that executive order be issued, where we tried to identify every single section, chapter of the revised code where the state of Ohio authorizes a license or certification to be issued, and we tried to identify within all five, if you count the Coast Guard, sorry Rick, all the branches of the military, which jobs within those branches correspond with that license, so that when those licensing agencies are ready to begin their search and their research, they'll know what jobs they should be looking at and who they should be talking to in those various branches.
As some of that's going on, there's some creative partnering going on, which Tri-C specifically is a part of, and Clayton is involved in this. If you've heard of a group in Northeast Ohio called Magnet, the Manufacturing Growth Network, they are actively engaged. They're on the White House Commission with us, where they will work with manufacturers in the area. They identify a job position. That manufacturer wants to hire a veteran. And then they work with Clayton to do the skills assessment. And if that young veteran has everything the employer needs, they have qualification A, B, and D, but they see there may be some training required for C, if you will, computer numeric controls, that veteran is then handed off to Tri-C, to our WED program. We fill that training gap to prep them, turn them back over to Clayton and the folks at Magnet than to have that veteran placed. The college is involved in a similar program with the Cleveland Clinic on medical positions out there where I feel horrible. I should remember the gentleman's name. He's third highest ranking person in the Cleveland Clinic, is a 2-star Army Reserve general. And he initiated this program. If you're not aware, you go to the clinic, if you're a veteran, no matter what the job position is, you will get an interview, at least get an interview. But the same thing, the clinic brings the veterans in, they do the skills assessment for the position the clinic is looking for. Where there might be a training gap or deficiency, they are brought back to Tri-C, to our healthcare initiatives programs. We fill that gap, prep them, hand them back to the Cleveland Clinic for job placement. And that's even broadened out. SUMA is involved in that now with Tri-C. So well, legislation is working, as Danny has mentioned, we're not waiting. Those are some of the things that are beginning to happen where there's some really good private sector partnerships. The college has a very good relationship with AT&T. We have gotten AT&T to meet with the Director of Veteran Services on their job hiring issues. They have a very aggressive program to hire veterans, but key in working at this route, as I mentioned again, is making sure that the jobs are real jobs. I applauded Washington for the tax credit concept, but at the same time, those of us who are veterans are being real careful, as we say in the vernacular, of covering the 6 of the men and women we serve with to make sure they're getting something that's going to have meaning and they can make a career out of. Some of the other things we're involved in, Clayton, anything new on the horizon at JFS? The thing with the White House Commission, I'll jump where you're thinking, is working to provide a single entry source. One of the biggest challenges veterans have in this area in the state, Dan knows this, Clayton knows this, we only have one major military base in this state, Wright-Patterson. But we have a lot of veterans, just a little shy of 1 million right now.
840,000.
840,000 veterans, state of Ohio. And there are a lot of great resources out there, but where does a veteran begin? You go down south, whether it be Texas, Fort Hood, or along the coast, Parris Island, Norfolk, all the big bases. Even after you retire or you're discharged, you can always, as we say in the military, go back inside the fence line to see job services at the base, to see the chaplain for family issues. That's tough to do in Northern Ohio. So part of what this White House Commission that we're all involved in is looking at is a single portal of entry, not creating a new thing, because there are a lot of great services out there. And the tentative model we're looking at right now involves the 211 phone system. An entry point you call either as a veteran looking for an employment or an employer looking for veterans. The beauty of this system is probably the most up-to-date resource databases, because when you call 211, they also have the support, access to the support services. Geez, I really, Mr. Deschamps, would love to go to that job training at Tri-C to help me as a veteran get that job, but I have transportation issues. If I could get bus passes, well, through the 211 system, they have access to those resources right there in one stop. They have access to Danny. They have access to Ohio Jobs and Family Services. So if this works out right, and we develop this model here in Northern Ohio, the beauty is there are 17 211 phone systems in the state of Ohio. Once we get the template developed here, we could roll this out as a statewide initiative. So you as a veteran, once you come in and then you work with Clayton's team or Danny's team and you get into the Ohio Means Jobs database, if you're up for relocation, it's not an issue to stay in Cleveland, but through Ohio Means Jobs and what DVS is doing, the job you're looking for might be in Dublin, it might be down in Mount Gilead. Now we can start cross-referencing to find you, because the goal is we want to keep your talent here in Ohio. I mean, all you have to do is look at the state's history. This state hit its economic stride post-World War II, due in large part to the veterans who were coming home who just knew how to get the job done and do the mission. Is it the end all to the state's issues? No, but it's a great starting point and it's a great leadership core. And selfishly, that's why all of us are involved in what we're doing. We want to keep you here in Ohio. Clayton, I'm sorry, what else might JFS be working on that this audience should be aware of?
The biggest thing we have going right now, and it's always been our $64,000 question, and we know that there's 840,000 veterans in the state of Ohio, and we know that the largest per capita of that group is in Cuyahoga County. So our biggest goal, our biggest challenge is to find these veterans. So, our initiatives are always centered around, most recently it was centered around homeless veterans, the Homeless Veterans Initiative. That we don't want to see any veterans living under a bridge. We want to get every veteran housing of some sort and then into a program that transitions them into their own stable permanent housing. That has evolved into, well, wait a minute, we don't just want to find homeless veterans, we want to find all of them. You mean the biggest point of my own personal, I don't want to say regret, but is that I personally, when I got out of the military in '95, I didn't realize that any of these services were available until about 3 years ago when I walked into a one-stop and asked the questions. So if you don't ask, you don't know where they are. And that is our current mission, is to get the message out to every veteran, not only the veterans coming home right now, but the veterans who have been home, have struggles of employment, housing, you name it. We're here to help, and we want them to know that we're here. Many of them know that there's an employment connection downtown, but would have no idea that there are staff in there whose mission it is to work with veterans. That they can walk into the VA hospital and get health care, whether or not they were a disabled veteran. So our focus is on finding the vets that we haven't already talked to. We want to get out there, we want to bring them all into the fold. That is our current initiative and our current struggle. And what we need, ask for, could always use more help with, is finding the vets.
Similar here to the college. That's why the initiative that I run was stood up more aggressively 5 years ago. We know the vets are coming home. Education is key, particularly to veterans in transition and the work we've done with the VA. The goals in transitioning home, always in the top 3, is continuance of education. And all of us at one point in our careers were in a recruiting office, and family was there, and the number one promise a 19-year-old, 18-year-old makes mom and dad is, I will go to college when I get out of the Army or the Navy. So we have done some creative partnerships with recruiting commands here to help them fulfill that promise. We have brought out, just last September, we had 33 Army recruits here at this campus with the recruiters, but I did the presentation, John Carroll, Cleveland State, to inform the parents that came with them about this thing called the GI Bill. And guess what? The recruiters weren't pulling your leg, because when your son and daughter gets out, here are the schools in Northeast Ohio that would love to have them come to their campus, and here are the programs we have to help them fulfill that promise. It's called Future Soldiers, and the goal, quite selfishly, is to retain that talent here in Ohio. One of the big initiatives going on is through Danny's department and what was the Ohio Department of Economic Development, and I don't know if you can see the screen over here. Ohio Means Jobs. Dan, if you want to do a quick 5 minutes on the site and what resources are, here's an example of one new resource to knock down those barriers.
Well, what you're looking at on the screen is if you go to ohiomeansjobs.com, which is a massive database, it's monster-based, that allows employers and job seekers to utilize a state asset to post their resumes and to search for jobs, and for employers to search for job seekers. They have a subset called Ohio Means Veteran Jobs. Now, part of what a veteran gets through JFS services is what they call priority of service. Among those priority of services, that if you identify yourself a veteran when you post your resume, when an employer is searching for a job, enters their search criteria, I need this type of person to work here, the first resumes that will appear will be veteran resumes, and they will appear with a small V designating that this is a veteran. And so it's one of the, we've been trying to push employers to use it, not just to hire veterans, but as I think the state of Ohio has 88 workforce programs housed in, 77 workforce programs housed in 14 different agencies. The governor's goal is can't necessarily get rid of the sausage grinder, but the idea is to make to the customer, the job seeker and the employer, to make it look like one process. Ohio Means Veterans Jobs is a big part of that process. I think from our department's perspective that the ODJFS VETS program is the most successful veteran employment program in the state. We want to push them so many vets to the point that they have to ask for more money, which we're prepared to do, and prepared to make changes at the federal level if we have to as well. So, so that's really kind of what we're trying to get them to do, and to build on part of the, trying to find veterans. That obviously is our statutory mission, is to find, which sounds easier than it is, but given that the federal organizations that make veterans and treat them aren't allowed to share that information with us, we have to find creative ways. And so we've been trying to work with JFS, work with Medicaid to identify veterans who may be on Medicaid service who can be transitioned over to VA. We try to work with public safety because obviously a lot of folks have an armed forces logo or veteran license plate, so they share a lot of information with us. I was recently allowed to hire what I'm calling a military liaison, which as far as I know is the first job of its type in a state organization, where his only job is to identify and provide information not only about veteran benefits, but also military benefits for active duty and Federal Reserve component forces here in the state of Ohio. We're also working with the Department of Defense as part of the new Federal Transition GPS program, which will require a 12-month transition period in the military, that they include the states as part of that process, and that they reach out to us and identify who are the folks who are going to be separating, who have identified that they want to come to Ohio. Give that information to our military liaison, at which point we begin selling that service member on coming to this state through employment programs, education, spousal licensing, professional licensing, all of the things that we have, 88 county veteran service officers, veterans bonuses, et cetera, et cetera. And we begin selling them on coming to this state and utilizing the resources we have here. And then hopefully once we have that contact, we have a lifelong relationship where we can communicate new information, new resources, new benefits, and boy, if it all works out, it would just be great, but we're a long way from it.
And Danny hit an interesting point. We're one of the, how many states have every county where you have a Veteran Service Commission?
We're one of the few states where there's a Veteran Service Commission in every single county. It doesn't always work well. Sometimes when it works well, it's by chance rather than by design, because each county is obviously independently funded within the county. That said, though, the counties like Cuyahoga, in my mind, the Cuyahoga County Commission is probably one of the flagships. They've appointed service officers not only to deal with benefits claims, but also education claims, employment issues. They work a lot within the budget they have to do a lot of outreach, and they're a good, viable partner for the state and the federal government up here in the Cleveland area. And certainly, having folks like, in terms of veterans education, Northeast Ohio is really the model for the state, and we've been trying to encourage other parts of the state to adopt the things that have already been adopted long here in Tri-C, Cleveland State, Kent State, Akron, Youngstown State has come around over the last couple of years. So really make great programs, and we're going to be pushing a little bit harder to try to get them to accept more education and training for credit, because they've done the initial steps. Tri-C is a leader in this, but some of the other colleges are a little slower to, they really don't like outsiders dictating their credit policies, but at the same time it's like, well, you're publicly funded, so guess what? So, so we're going to keep pushing those types of things, and we're hoping, we're heartened by the fact that Ohio State University, the flagship university of the system, recently established its own Veteran and Military Services Office, and once they do it, a lot of other schools fall in line. So, we have a lot of work to do, but
we're getting there.
We're getting there.
State. Yeah, we belong to what we call it the Northern Ohio College Collaboration, and as Danny mentioned, some of the schools, Lorain County Community Colleges in that, Lakeland, Lake Erie, Kent, Hiram, Notre Dame. There's about 12 of us, and it's a purple operation, as we say in the military. School colors don't matter. It's sharing of best practices, including that Future Soldiers program. We've got 5 schools, and we rotate that between campuses when we do that to give parents exposure to a private yellow ribbon school versus a Tri-C versus a Cleveland State. Clayton, as we wrap up resources, how many one-stops we have up here in the area and employment connections that veterans can take advantage of?
Just in Cuyahoga County, we have 2 what we call one-stops, 2 employment connections, where there are vet staff there all the time to assist veterans as they come in. One is the employment connection, as Rick mentioned, on the corner of Chevrolet Boulevard and Brook Park Road, just up the street, and another one is in downtown Cleveland on Oliver Road, which is right across East 9th from Progressive Field. Both of those facilities are essentially like any other government office, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. But there is always vet staff there. We are, in addition to those offices, if you stray over into Lorain County, we have an office in Elyria, the Employment Network, or the other direction at Lake County. It's the Lake One Stop, which is right in downtown Painesville. Again, vet staff there all the time, as well as the Vet Service Commissions are also an excellent resource. The Vet Service Commission in Cuyahoga County is right on 1849 Prospect, right across from the Wilstein Center. Great resource. They have people there to help with employment, to help with education claims, VA claims, temporary financial assistance. We work closely with them, so if they feel that there's a need to bring us in, we're right there, and vice versa. When someone comes to our office, if they need any of those benefits at the Vet Service Commission, it's a two-way street. So some excellent resources here in Cuyahoga County, in Cleveland. I know driving into Cleveland can sometimes be a pain in the butt. Parking is never fun, but at least at our office in downtown Cleveland, the parking is on the first floor of the facility, and it is free. Well, it fills up in a hurry, but it's free. Parking is free at our office in Parma, and even at the Vet Service Commission, there are lots on either side that only cost a couple bucks. So, if you need anything, I mean, I sound like a broken record, but if you need anything, definitely come in, and all you have to do is say that you want to talk to a vet rep. And priority of service kicks in, and they have to bring you to us.
So as you can see, while there are some barriers still and issues that have to be addressed from the medical community to the legislative community, we're making some strides, maybe smaller steps, but I'm proud to say I think Ohio, and specifically Northeast Ohio, is moving ahead a little bit further than some other areas of the country. While we have a few minutes left, we can take 2 or 3 questions. If you direct them to me, this is being taped so I can repeat the question for the benefit of those taping. Do we have any questions from the audience today you'd like to talk about? Hearing none, how many, quick show of hands, how many veterans are sitting in today besides the 3 of us? Thank you all for your service on this Veterans Day. It's greatly appreciated. I want to again thank my panelists today for being here today. Dan Akins, Programs Administrator from the Ohio Department of Veteran Services in Columbus. Clayton Cozy, Vet Rep from the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services. And again, I'm Rick Deschamps, your Executive Director of Veteran Services for here at Cuyahoga Community College, where futures begin. I think we all kind of absorbed that theme. Thanks for being here. We will stick around for a little bit afterward, and enjoy your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.